Hi, everybody. This is Kathleen from A Great Good Place for Books, and I'm super excited tonight. I've been wanting to do an event with Allison Larkin for a very, very long time. So basically, I started stalking her. And when she came in the store, I said, I love this book. It's called The People We Keep. And I said, please, please come be a guest in our Zoom studio. And then she said, how about I invite my friend Bruce Holsinger, the author of The Gifted School? And I went, uh-huh. So I'm super excited to welcome both of you to the Zoom studio tonight and take it away. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kathleen. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with Allie and with everybody watching us. And I think as your conversationalist, I get the prerogative to begin, Allie. So I have so many questions. I have about 2,000 questions for you. I have craft questions, art questions, life questions, different ways that the strands in this wonderful book that I've known for a long time kind of come together. But I thought I'd ask a question that kind of picks up on something that you say in your acknowledgments about this book, about how long it's been inside you and how this, that when you were finishing the final draft, you went back and found the first glimmerings of this wonderful character, April, in a short story that you'd written in 2006, I think it was, so 15 years ago. So I wonder if you can, we always have this tell us about the book question, but I want to hear about, where the book came from and the depth of that experience for you when you started writing this and when it came to you and how it developed over that very long period of time in your life.
Yeah, I was working on Stay, which was my first novel, and I had 8 pages due for writing group the next day. And I was listening to a playlist of music that I thought fit that book pretty well. And Dar Williams' song Iowa, I don't know if you've ever heard that, it came up. And I started thinking, she's a folk singer, and I started thinking about folk singers just in general. I was named after a Gordon Lightfoot song, and I grew up on a steady diet of folk music. And so that was a huge part of my life. And then I suddenly had that moment of like, what must that life actually be like to, not be a huge star, but be somewhat known and travel and actually be a working musician. What is that like? And I don't know why my brain went there. And then the next song was The Water Boys, a song called This Is the Sea. And it talks about these things you keep, you better throw them away. And talking about your past life, like that was the river and this is the sea. And all of a sudden I felt like there was this girl in my head with long brown hair and a guitar. And she was just like, hey, I'm over here. I just kept thinking about her, and she was taking something and leaving something wherever she went. And I couldn't stop thinking about her. She was leaving a sweater in a hotel room, and she had a lot of feelings about it, and I didn't understand what they were yet. And that scene's about halfway through the book. I wrote
the scene of the leaving of the sweater.
Leaving the sweater.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to realize whose sweater that was and where she came from. But I started writing there, and then started asking myself questions. I think I wrote about 6,000 words that night. I felt like a possessed human being. I had to get it out. I couldn't write my other pages until I did. And then I started asking myself questions like, where did she come from? How did she end up here? Who is this person? And I got back to the beginning of the book, which is this 16-year-old folk singer named April Sawicki. She lives in a motorless motorhome in a very small town outside of Buffalo, New York. And she's taught herself how to hotwire cars with a library book. And she steals a car and goes to an open mic night with her guitar and doesn't know what she's doing. And that's where the book starts. And
yeah, and it's so it starts in 2 different places for you when you were writing. It started with that little fragment, just a little image of a sweater abandoned in a hotel room, but then it starts with her, as you say, hot wiring a car and going to an open mic night. And those are 2 different beginnings. And the book has one of the things about this story, and I wonder if you could talk about, just lay out some of the structure of it, because the book has a lot of beginnings in it. right?
Yes.
It has, and those beginnings are all, they all build on each other. They're all cumulative. As April goes through and meets these various people that we keep, people that she keeps, she is, beginning anew, but all those beginnings add up to something. And so, as I read the novel, there's just something structural about that that's really wonderful, that works to keep us, we all create suspense in different ways. And I think one of the ways that you did it is like, what will be her new beginning? Not after the novel, but during the novel. We just keep seeing her starting again. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I can see two reasons for that, like for why that happened in what I was writing. The first one being that The Song of the Lark is my favorite book by Willa Cather, and it follows the musician through her humble beginnings in a small town and all the way into being an opera singer, which is, much different from April's trajectory, but she has beginnings like that. She has different stages of her life. But also I can look at my life and see those stages too, which, how many times felt like a beginning for me, how many times in my life were false starts. I went to college at Ithaca College for 2 years, and then I dropped out for a while, and I worked as a bartender, and I didn't really know how long that would go on and what my next start would be. And I also, grew up as a theater person. I was a theater major at Ithaca. And so you have this sense of plays, and everybody's very close while you're working on a play, and you're like family. And then maybe you'll never see them again, or maybe you'll work on another play with them. And so, but there's that intimacy immediately. And so I think I was kind of trained in my life to go through life with that, oh, we just met, we're already best friends.
Right.
And then sometimes people come with you and sometimes they don't. And, it's sad when they don't, but it's great when people stick around.
But we can also be agents in that choice. That's one of the things your book teaches us, I think, is that it's an ethical choice, a personal choice, that we can decide on who we keep, right?
Yes.
The things that the book really insists on.
Yeah, I think the family you choose is such a powerful thing that you don't have to let people go. I've been texting with my summer camp friend Kate from when I was a little kid. During the pandemic, we started talking on the phone again on a more regular basis and checking in, and it's like no time has passed, and we are 9-year-old girls laughing on the phone together, and it's just the most brilliant thing. And I think that's just the beautiful part of being human. It's one of the most beautiful things, is that connection, and how it doesn't really have to fade. It just sometimes needs to be rekindled a little bit.
April really knows how to forge connections. She's, and I want you to talk about April. You talk about how she came to you, but she's so funny, but she's also cynical. She's just super observant. She's, she sees everything, notices everything. And I, part of me was just, finishing the book, just wanting to write April Sawicki fan fiction or something. And I wonder if you can talk about how she developed as you developed the book, how, the kind of the arc, not the arc of the character in her novel, but the arc of how you developed her, how she became more and more complex as the years went on, and what kinds of things accrued to her. How did her character build in your mind and on the page?
I think it's really interesting because I don't feel like she changed much in the whole process. I feel like I just learned more about her, and it all made sense to that initial person. I think she's a little less cynical than she was when I started writing her. But I also think, one of the things that happened in writing this book is that I wrote 3 other books. And my third book, Swimming for Sunlight, I had to get really honest about, my main character in that book has anxiety. And I had to get really honest about how anxiety has taken up space in my heart and my mind. And I feel like I jiggled something loose. Like I got another level of freedom in terms of how I can describe my sensory experiences and what I'm willing to delve into in terms of emotions. Like the facts of my books are never true, but the emotions are. And I feel like I gained emotional dexterity over the time that I was writing this book, and I was able to give it to April, and also able to see her situation as an adult. I was in my 20s when I started writing this book, and I'm 44 now. So, like going through the process of having the perspective, I think it shifted some things a little bit in terms of what I could write about, how I could hint at when she might be in danger, even if she doesn't see it yet. I could put those details in and add layers, but like the core of who April is just kind of happened that way. I do think the way she sees the world is a lot of the way that I see the world. I think, I think the way that she connects with people is a little bit of attachment disorder. If you think about what someone with attachment disorder is, how people connect for survival. She's really good at that, and it's not intended to be manipulative. I think she's really earnest in her desire to connect with people, but she needs people to survive.
Yeah. Well, that striving for connection is, you brought up your other novels. That is a constant theme in the Larkin corpus. I think, that in Swimming for Sunlight, was it Val or Viv or who's trying to, or that's from Stay, right?
Van from Stay. Yeah.
Van from Stay, who like brings a dog into her life and is, finding a new family that way. And then in Swimming for Sunlight, it's about, this group of water dancers or water performers, right?
Yes.
They're just crazy new family. And it's all of that. I wouldn't call that, I don't know if I'd call it attachment disorder in those novels, but it's certainly a desire to affiliate yourself with something. So
yes.
I don't want to make you too self-conscious about the commonalities of your novels, because each of our novels is different, of course, but I wonder if that is, do you think about themes continuing from novel to novel? Do you think of yourself as doing something different?
I follow my character so much, but I am aware of my theme. Years ago, Claire Cook, who wrote Must Love Dogs, said something to me about how all writers kind of have their theme, and you see it over and over again in their books. And it made me feel like it's okay to look at the same theme from every different angle, and I definitely found family is my theme. I am, a person who has this big, beautiful family of people I've met along the way, and trying to find that connection, and also trying to get to a point where I realize that these people aren't accidents in my life, that they're in my life because I am someone to them too. I think has been my growing up experience, and has actually made me a better friend and a better, family member because of that.
Yeah. And I wonder, the way that you describe April just being there, right? She was there looking for these attachments. It's something that you're familiar with. But the way you described her as already there and you had to find her, it reminds me of the way sculptors sometimes describe, the statue that's in the stone or in the marble that is already there. And all I need to do is kind of clear everything out of the way to find the figure. And I wonder, does that analogy help you at all? Or
so much that fits so perfectly. It was like I just had to clear out the other thoughts. Like I just had to kind of uncover what was there. The song that's at the beginning of the book, the lyrics from Chris Parika's song, Compass Rose, which is just an absolutely gorgeous song. She's my favorite musician. That was a pivotal moment for me in the book, in the process, like the life of this book. The words are, I know that someday I'll offer up a song I was made to play. And it goes on to say, like, a couple lines down the road that, and the mornings will make sense. Like once I say this thing, this is what I was made for. Once I do this, the mornings will make sense. And at some point when I was really struggling with what other people wanted this book to be, I could not stop thinking about that song. And it finally narrowed down to me just singing those lines. And I remember being in the shower and singing those lines and just sobbing all of a sudden, and I couldn't quite figure it out. And then I had this moment of, this is the book I was made to write.
Hmm.
And so that's the thing. I don't understand why or how, because we did have different life experiences, but for some reason, everything I've gone through in my life spun together in my head. And this was what I needed to write. Like this is, you know, to some extent, like this is my memoir, but it's an allegory, you know?
All right. So now you're getting technical, because that is, I wanted to ask you about autofiction, and I was going to save that question until later. But we are in an age of autofiction, right?
Yeah.
With and I we see so much of the discourse around that, with Sally Rooney, with of course with Knausgaard, with so many other writers, poaching on that or thinking about it as part of their genre. You just used the word allegory, that the idea that one thing in the book is everything in the book is standing for something else outside the book. And there are autobiographical elements, you say, but I wonder if you were conscious of that while you were writing the book, of dancing around this category, or are you just like rolling your eyes, that's not what I do?
Well, no, I mean, I think that's an interesting category. I think I didn't know I was doing it for a very long time. And then I had a draft and I was going through it, and I could see like, oh, I've had people in my life who felt like Margo to me. I've had people who really took me under their wing, and I know what that feels like. And I took those paints and painted Margo, even though Margo is not anybody I've met before. But I've also, one of my friends from college read the book and pointed out a scene, and she was like, did you write this because of that thing that happened with this other thing? And I had no clue. I thought I had taken this whole book apart and been like, here's what, it's almost like a fever dream. And I wrote it, and now I'm figuring out what I collected in my head to write it. But but I hadn't even figured it all out, because one of my best friends figured out that, but none of it translates directly. The only thing that does translate directly is that after I had dropped out of college, I took my guitar and went to an open mic night and walked in. And I did not steal a car to get there, but I just walked right in. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how they worked. Do you sign up? What's the deal? And I just went and played. And it felt a lot like the one in this. And there was another woman who played before me who was just absolutely incredible. And I got up and just kind of plunked out some chords and sang the song I wrote, and got this really great response, and was like, I don't know what happened, because she's good,
Right.
So, but I think there's something about that, just earnestly wanting to do something that connects with people. And so I did give that moment to April. But otherwise, the textures are textures I've experienced. I worked in a biker bar, and you'll see April, and I worked in an Italian restaurant that's like probably a lot like Margo's Diner in terms of the crowd that was there. And so it's like I'm working with a paint set or a certain amount of texture that I've experienced.
Great. Well, let's hear some of that texture. I'd love to have you read a little excerpt, and then I want to ask you about your voice and some of your choices.
Okay. All right. I'm going to put my reading glasses on, because that's where I am with things. After my dad bought the land and we moved out to the motorhome, I didn't get to do laundry with Margo anymore. Stop in and see me after school sometime, she said on our last Sunday night at the Wash and Fold. So I did, every day after school, because I didn't like going back to the empty motorhome. I ordered pudding or cream corn or whatever I'd rounded up enough change to get. When Margo had something that wasn't moving, she'd wink at me and say, "Beets are on special today, sweetie, for you, 13 cents. If it was slow, she'd tell me the special came with dessert. And whatever the special was, I ate it, even if I didn't like it, just so I wouldn't hurt Margo's feelings. I'd spread my books out on the back table and try to do my homework, but mostly I just watched people. Sometimes my dad would pick me up on his way home from a job. He'd sit in the car and honk until I came out, because he refused to set foot in the diner. Most days, though, I'd stay and help Margo close up, then she'd drive me home. If my dad wasn't back yet, she'd idle in the driveway and shake her head. "Oh, I hate to leave you here," she'd murmur, clucking her tongue. "No place for a girl to live." "It's our clubhouse," I'd say, repeating what my dad told me when I complained about the motorhome. "Not many kids get to live in a clubhouse." "I'd take you at my place if I could, she'd say, sighing. "But what can I do?" I never knew how to answer.
Mm, that's wonderful. That is it's interesting that you chose to read that portion, because that's one of the few, if I'm not wrong, that's one of the few places in the book that's actually in past tense.
Yes.
Most of the book is in present, and that's one of the things that's so striking about it. I'll just, read from your very beginning. I'm standing at the end of my driveway in the dark, watching Mrs. Varnick's trailer, waiting for her lights to go out, getting really pissed off. I've been watching for at least a week and her lights went out at 8:30 every other night. She must have picked up a clear signal on reruns of Lawrence Welk or Hee Haw with her rabbit ears, because it's 8:45 and she's still plopped in her Barcalounger in the living room with the TV flickering and every light in the house blazing like she owns the damn electric company. So here you're in present tense, and so I want to ask you, just the kind of technical question about style and voice here. What made you choose to write the novel, first of all, in first person, and then, the main thread, the narrative present, in present tense, and then, how you decide when to go back to go into past tense? Because, these are for people who are aspiring writers out there, this is the big choice you need to make at the beginning of any novel is, first person, third person, past, present. And I just love to hear writers talk about those choices.
Yeah. April, and again, is the way she showed up to me, that she was so urgent that, she doesn't have perspective beyond things that happen to her. She's 16 when this starts, so she doesn't have a lot of perspective, and she has a lot of urgency. And I think that she needs to be observing in the moment because she's surviving. And so she's checking her surroundings. But then she has backstory and she's telling you where she came from and who these people are. The other thing I think is interesting is that I have attention deficit disorder. And I'm losing my voice a little bit. I have attention deficit disorder. And one of the things I've been doing recently is just learning more about it with like updated information. And one of the things they talk about with ADHD is that you have now and not now, that your sense of time is now and not now. And I realized that April's sense of time is now and not now. Yeah. It's like that happened then, but she doesn't have a vision of a future for herself. And I think that kind of dictates where she falls too. It's mostly a gut thing, not a stylistic thing. She just had that urgency and she needed it.
Yeah, and you are talking about her as as a real person, because she's a real person to you. She's certainly a real person to me after reading this, and I know she will be to so many readers who haven't had the pleasure of reading this book yet. But it's so different from, a book that this reminded me of was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which is also about a musician, but we get that story through oral history, people remembering her, and they're all talking about her in the third person, and they're drawing on their memories. And it's not distancing because you really get to know her, but you get to know her in a fundamentally different way. So here we're in her very close first person. We only see, smell, touch, sense what she smells, sees, touches. It's her. It's so close. And I think that's it's a powerful way to get across that life, but it's one of many choices. So technically, did she come to you in first person, or did you start writing like April was standing on her driveway? Or was
she came to me in first person. She was leaving the sweater and she had some feelings about it and like not having to fix the sleeve anymore. She was just going to leave it. And I knew that it was weighted, and it was her like in present tense, like saying goodbye to this sweater. She did just show up that way. And then, because she's present tense, stylistically, I did have fun playing with April as a very earnest, but not necessarily always reliable narrator. And April, just her perspective on the world is very limited because of where she came from and where she's going and what she's, and in some ways she's so mature and she's so savvy, and then in some ways she's not. And present tense lends itself so nicely to that, because you also get the feeling that she's not judging her experience yet. Like judgment comes later when you're reflecting on an experience. In the moment, she doesn't have a lot of time or room for judgment. And I liked that. That was fun.
Yeah, you used the word urgent when you were talking about present tense.
Yeah.
And that's the way it felt to me. It just felt very propulsive, that voice, that we would just be right there with her.
Yeah, it felt like that writing it, which was just so lovely. I felt like I was right in the middle of it. And, sometimes I could see things that she couldn't see, but it felt like she just felt inevitable, all of it.
Another way that you create, is another kind of craft question, but another way that you create suspense and kind of propel the reader through this book is with your chapter structures. And I'm just going to hold this up so people can see. For example, this is not every chapter is this short, but this is pretty typical, where the chapter might be no more really than a page and a half. Then there's other chapters that'll be 5 or 6 pages. And to tell us a little bit about how you conceive of a chapter. How do you know when a chapter is right? Are you deliberately balancing different chapter lengths? Because that's one of the things, you think of somebody like I don't know, James Patterson, right? The chapters all of them are a page and a half long, and it's just one of the things that keeps you turning pages. Is something I've thought a lot about.
Yeah.
About some shortening some chapters to keep people invested. So what's talk to us about the chapter.
I do like I do like short chapters. I do feel like, when you're reading at night and you should go to bed and you're like, oh, the next chapter is short, I'll just read it. I do like that. I think with her though, again, it just kind of happened in terms of what felt like the right pacing and the right rhythm. But also that is about present tense, because if you're in present tense with her, switching chapters, so we're jumping in time, is really helpful, because otherwise, what's her next step? What's her next moment? Is her awareness becomes an issue, because she's so aware. So we could have something where she's going through looking at the table for, the lines in the table and the person over there. And, to tell a story, you kind of have to curate her attention. And so the shorter chapters sometimes we're just going to tell you what you need to know to get to the next thing, because we could just spend, 27 pages with April in a restaurant, and I would love to do that, and I have done that. And then, sometimes you just take out everything you don't need.
This is a hilarious conversation though, because you keep it's as if April wrote the book, right? I didn't have anything to do with the chapters.
April wanted it that way.
And I just think that you're underselling your talent. And because it's, that's the thing that just doesn't come naturally. It takes really hard work. And, to me, the novel feels so effortless, but you can just feel the work in it, even to, the elements of research. And I wonder, that's another aspect of this that I'd love to hear you talk about, is the little bits of research that went into this. And I know the timeline is like mid 90s, right? And kind of 94 to 97 or 98, something like that.
Yeah, 94 to 98, I think.
So that is a hard historical era to research. I wrote some historical novels that were set in late medieval England, and compared to writing a novel set in 1994, that's nothing, the research, because 94, how do you even begin to think about technology? It's like writing a historical novel, but set in the recent past, and it just makes it more daunting. So I wonder, some of the research that you did just about everyday life and some of the things that surprised you.
It's interesting. I mean, I was at Ithaca College from 95 to 98, 97, 98, I think. 95 to, I'm bad with numbers. But so I I was there for some of it. So some of it is me just thinking about what my life was like, what technology I had available to me. One time on a road trip, I missed an exit on my map and ended up in
What's that?
Pennsylvania. Yeah, right. I ended up in Pennsylvania by accident when I was trying to go to Albany from downstate New York, and was so shocked by the welcome to Pennsylvania sign that I just kept driving, and it was like a half an hour into the state before it was like, wait, I really am in Pennsylvania. And I wanted to, when you were lost back then, you were really lost. When you said goodbye to someone, you didn't know, you weren't going to see them on Facebook 20 minutes later. I wanted that sense. I think maybe I needed to reckon with that sense a little bit of the people that I lost along the way, the people I won't be able to find again. I never knew their last name. I liked that. I liked working in that realm. I did have to research interesting things. Like, I had an issue with a driver's license where I was trying to find, I needed to see a driver's license. I needed a book that they used to have to compare driver's licenses to see if it was a fake. And somebody, Anya Zato, found it for me. I was crowdsourcing a lot of stuff of like, what year did you work in an office where you had a phone that did XYZ? Like, did you have caller ID on your phone in your office? And then I would really quiz people as to like whether their memory was correct. Because sometimes people think things happened earlier than they did, or so, and it's also funny because people love answering those questions and it's so beautiful, but you're having this moment of like, I need this one piece of information, and you ask a question and people say, oh, here's a picture of my driver's license from 2000. And I'm like, no, I need your 1994. Like, this doesn't help me. All of a sudden, I have like a collection of pictures of, I mean, I deleted them, but I did have like a collection of pictures of people's like driver's licenses when they were kids. It could not help me.
To do some identity theft. You can say, I really need pictures of driver's licenses from. What did a social security card look like? And
yeah, exactly. So,
did you ever hotwire a car?
I didn't, but I do feel like I have a pretty strong idea of how to do it, which is
or I guess how you could have done it.
I could have done it.
A car in the 1990s, like now.
Exactly, not now.
A lot more difficult. Yeah,
not now, but I could do it if there was a 1990 Oldsmobile or something lying around, maybe.
So what about when you began this long ago, then you had a draft. I mean, I read an early draft of this novel, as you've read drafts of mine, and it's changed a lot. It hasn't changed a massive amount, but it's changed a fair amount. And do you agonize over revision? What do you prefer, like sitting down and writing fresh prose, like 6,000 words a day, as you were saying in the early years of this story, or do you like revision? Like, what's the balance there? And people often think, you write your novel and it's ready, you turn it in. But, a first draft is just a first draft, a shitty first draft, as Anne Lamott calls it, and what's revision like for you? What's your process with that?
With this book, because for so long I was revising it with different input and then taking input back out. The point where, and you were such a huge part of that, because I had been getting all this feedback about it just should be something else other than what I wanted it to be. And I'd put it aside, and then you gave me some work to read. And so I had this, so I sent it to you, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. And then, you changed everything by just your belief in it and your understanding of it. And I'm just always so thankful for that. And then I know you read it again later. It really did change everything. It took this novel out of a drawer that it might have stayed in otherwise. So that means a lot to me. But you asked me about revision. Like, one of the things I realized, I have this sense of like, I read everything out loud to myself. I have a weird sense of like a rhythm, or like things feel right or they don't feel right. And I think especially dealing with a character, she's not grammatically correct, and dealing with a character who has a very specific voice there
Mhm.
was a feeling of that, like having to make sure that that felt right. It was kind of like an ear thing, it was like,
Mhm.
it was like trying to write a song to some extent where you're like, oh, I can't, even down to little words. It's like, oh, she wouldn't say for, she'd say with, or she wouldn't, that sense of something about that process really lights my brain up. And I really liked that. I did include, the last draft, there's a very big scene that is needed to be there forever. And it wasn't until my editor, Hannah Broughton, who is just brilliant, was like, I kind of want to see that. And I was like, April doesn't want you to see that. And then, so we're not going to go there. And then I walked away from it. And all of a sudden I was like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And all of a sudden I knew, there were just words in my head again. And it was like, oh, static and stars. And okay, I know how to write this. And it was always there. And how could it not have happened? And thank goodness Hannah, shook it out of me. But I loved playing in that world because because I've been in it for so long that she could kind of jiggle something out of the process and I could just dive in and write what needed to be written.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that so revision was almost like part of the process of discovery, part of the
Yeah,
process of inventing this, of yet more chips in the marble that you would take out as you were getting closer and closer to
yeah,
discovering people in there somewhere.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Almost like a
But then,
scratch off ticket.
so then what's the most difficult part of writing fiction for you? Like when are you at your lowest in the writing, in that world? Um, what makes it challenging?
I think I have a really hard time writing. I have a hard time doing the thing where I sit down to write where I don't know what I'm writing. I'm not good at being a word count person. I'm kind of a binge writer. And I would like to not be. I would like to be more methodical. And that's just not how my brain works. I can, my second novel I wrote in 6 months. And I did have an outline. And the way that I did that was I would sit down and say, okay, I don't know what's next. What do I know? And then I would write that scene and put that together. And that was helpful in my process of everything else too, because I think I'm a constellation thinker. And I've
Mhm.
learned to just kind of catch all the stars and then figure out how they go together and trust that they will, because my brain's doing something that I'm not fully aware of yet.
Right.
But sometimes you lose faith in that. It's like the self-doubt of it. And you know I think it's really hard to go from finishing a book and having everything to going back to the murky waters of,
Yes.
oh, I see this clearly, I know this person clearly, and that's kind of difficult. And for April, she was with me through all the other things, so I'd just dive back in and know her and it would feel comfortable, and then I'd be meeting new characters at the same
Yeah.
time, and they were more difficult a lot of the time.
Right, of course. I have a few more questions, but I want to make sure
Yeah.
that we start opening it up to other people's questions. So please, if you have some, just post them in the Q&A and we will get to them. I wanted to ask you about so you've turned your novel in, you've done all the revisions, you've done edits, and then, in those months leading up to publication, one of the things you learned was that the book had been selected for the Book of the Month Club. And talk a little bit about what pre-publication is like, your jitters. It's always scary when you have a novel coming out, and I wonder what that experience is like for you, and
Yeah,
how you cope with it.
it was less scary with this book than it had been, and less than I would have thought, just because I had gotten to the point, to some extent out of frustration in trying to find the right place for it. And then also finding the right place for it, I felt so good that I just felt like everything I put on the page was what I needed it to be.
Mhm.
And so I did this for me. I didn't do this one for anybody else. I am so thrilled that other people connect to it I think it's the greatest gift of my life to know that I put my whole heart into something and other people are like, oh, I feel that way too, or I understand, or this means something to me. That's just absolutely thrilling. But I didn't have the same worries of like, I hope people like my book going up to publication, because I just needed to do this. I was not like, this book made me who I am right now. The mornings make sense, you know?
Yeah.
So I needed that. I needed to do it. I couldn't have not. And I'm just so thrilled that I did. But I've been nervous before publication. And there is always that thing too. I don't know if you have this of, it's not the people I know very well, and it's not strangers. It's the people you sort of know. And all of a sudden they know what your heart feels like inside, you know, like that's a weird thing to walk out into the world and have, you know, somebody you just know conversationally and be like, oh, I just read your book. I'm like, ah.
Yes, I just read your book, and then they back away.
Yeah. There's like a pause, and you're like, what am I supposed to say?
The cover was so colorful. And, you know, you're you know, part of being an artist as you are is you know, experimenting in other art forms. And I, you know, we've talked about sculpture a little bit, but you also are a guitar player yourself. And I, you know, I've caught you on Instagram before, you know, playing, you know, trying to play Glenn Phillips songs and, you know, zooming into your guitar lessons. And do you ever think about parallels between playing music? You know, you've talked about lyrics a little bit because you wrote the lyrics for April's songs, but do you think about that relationship between, you know, those different kinds of art making on your guitar, on the page, and how those relate to each other?
Yeah, I think the creative process, one of the things over the years, because I was so frustrated with a lot of the feedback I was getting where people wanted the book to fit in a tiny box, one of the things I did with my frustration was learn as much as I could about the creative process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that creativity and making art is kind of a universal thing. The medium can change, but that core of an instinct and following it and making something greater than what would have existed otherwise is kind of all the same. And it's gathering your tools too, you know, and getting a dexterity with the tools that you have in front of you. I do play guitar. I'm not the best guitar player. Like I played when I was younger. I taught myself how to play, and then I stopped for a long time. And then I actually started taking guitar lessons because of April. I wanted to be more proficient at guitar so that I could write her better. But I also just always wanted to play guitar. I was always fascinated, and so that's why I wrote her. I did also study classical voice for 10 years. Okay. And that was like almost like a yoga practice to me. I had terrible stage fright, but I really loved actually the breath and the sound and controlling the sound and studying this music that's not current, you know, and putting meaning into words and languages I don't speak and all of that. I loved the practice of it and the structure of it.
Well, that, you know, I think the music creates a different language in the novel. You know, it really does intertwine in such a way that you can feel, you know, you can feel in the level of performance, her anxiety, that her nerves, her stage fright. You just want to give her a beta blocker before she gets in. But yeah,
had I known.
Past life as a musician too, I can identify with that. But then you also, you know, you feel the rhythm, you feel the lyrics coming at you. You know, and when you put real song lyrics in a book, I think you had one as an epigraph, I believe. You know, you have to get permission for them. You have to, you know, pay for the rights. But when you're writing the lyrics, it's like it becomes part of your own invention.
Yeah.
So that must have been a really fun kind of creative part of the writing of the novel for you.
I gave her one of the songs that I wrote in my 20s. So one of the songs that's in there, and I did play it on Instagram a while ago, is a real song. And then the other songs, like they did just kind of grow out of what I needed that song to be for her in the moment. And they don't necessarily exist as full songs as much as I have this image in my mind, and I have an idea of what they sound like, but I
Yeah.
just gave you the words you needed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. Well, I have, I'm just going to ask one last question, and then I invite audience members to post any questions that you have. And the last question I'll ask is about, you might not want to talk about what you're working on now, but I would love to know if we're going to hear, without giving any spoilers away for this novel, the ending is, it's a gorgeous ending that everyone is going to, be breathlessly waiting for. But, April, I would love to know if we're going to see her again, if we're going to get to read about April again, if you've thought about that, whether you're going to give her a sequel, whether April's story continues, and if so, how?
Yeah, it's interesting because you were talking at the beginning of our conversation about her different beginnings, and her ending is also a beginning. And I had not planned to write anymore, and then I was reading another book one morning, and I felt like April was like, "Hey, over here, I've got some feelings for you." It won't be my next book, and I want to make sure that it's not gratuitous, because again, I could write April forever. I mean, I love her so much. I love writing her. I could sit down and just write what she eats for breakfast as she's eating it and find her fascinating, So I need to make sure that she has actual story to tell, but also I do feel like I know what happens to all these characters. It also feels inevitable to me. I know like what Margo's up to and what Maddie's doing, and I know what happens to them. So it's definitely, I know for sure that I will write more about her. Whether anyone will see it, I hope so. But
we have a question in the chat about what we're working on next. So you go first. And
I'm not
superstitious and don't want to talk about it.
I'm not totally ready to talk about it yet, except I will say that it's another character who exists in present tense. I think I'm in a phase of present tense characters right now, and she is pretty immediate. And I feel like I've actually had to get to a whole other level of self-acceptance to write this one. I've had to be really honest about myself to give her the right tools, to have the right tools to write her. How about you?
Well, obviously, I can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
Usual. For I'm working on something now that I don't even know if it'll cohere into a novel. But the next novel that'll be coming out is called The Displacements, and it'll be out next summer. And it's a novel about what happens to this family, this very seemingly secure, okay family living in Miami when the world's first Category 6 hurricane comes and displaces them, along with millions of others from Florida and also from Houston, from the Houston area. So it's a novel about downward mobility and climate change, but very much about the present. It's not a book projected into a future, a catastrophic future. It's very much about now. And it's about resilience and art and survival. But it's also, Ali, it's also written in the present tense. It's written from multiple points of view, but they're all in third person present tense. So it's, and I think the urgency is exactly the right word. I wanted a tense of the kind of very near future to get that novel across.
Yeah, that was absolutely the right choice. I did get to read. I did get to read a draft of your book, and I don't even feel like I'm overselling it to say it's one of the best books I've ever read.
Oh,
so
stop. Well, that's how I feel.
No, I'm serious. I'm serious. It was so visceral and absorbing, and I love those characters, and I was so invested. And like my husband kept walking in the room, and I jumped because I forgot that I wasn't in their lives. So I'm very excited. So you did an incredible job with present tense.
Back at you.
Immediacy. Thank you.
Well, it's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, I'm so happy to see you.
You too.
So lovely. Yeah.
Thank you so much, both Bruce and Allison. What a great conversation. Just totally enjoyed that. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Everybody, we've got in the chat there our links to buy both Allison's book and Bruce's latest book. And we've also got back stock at the store. So please join us and pick up these wonderful books. And thank you both again so much. Nicely done. Mutually balanced there. Good work.
Great. Well, thank you all for having us, Kathleen and
Yes,
Michael.
thank you.
You're so very welcome. You guys have a great evening, and bye everyone.
You too.
Bye.
All right,
Take
take care.
care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.